Most entrepreneurs think hiring across time zones gives them a competitive advantage, but without the right communications framework, you're actually paying a hidden time zone tax that's bleeding your business dry. The rule is simple. 3 time zones require 5 times the communication touchpoints. Are you paying the tax or leveraging the advantage? When your team is spread across the globe, the invisible gaps between time zones create information vacuums that get filled with assumptions, frustrations, and costly mistakes. Stanford research demonstrated that distributed teams with inadequate communications cadence lose an average of 12.3 hours per week per employee with mismanagement and rework. How much is time zone confusing costing your team's productivity right now? Time zone tax extracts approximately $1.2 million from the average mid-sized distributed company over 3 years through reduced velocity, employee dissatisfaction, and customer experience failures. Companies that fail to implement structured communication multipliers for distance experience 4.2% higher rates of critical information falling through the cracks and more frequent than we thought you were handling at moments. Every communication gap you leave unfulfilled isn't just inconvenience. It's a systematic drain on your company's potential that grows exponentially with each additional time zone. This is something that we don't talk about enough. We talk about a distributed company, we talk about a virtual company, but no one's really talking about the disadvantage of time zones. Now, it's always great. And it used to be that we talked about around the sun coding or around the sun work or follow the sun work, where you'd start in New York and you'd build something in New York and then it would go to Los Angeles and then it would get some time in Los Angeles and then it would go to Asia and then it would go to Singapore and then it would go into India and then into Africa and then into Europe and come back to America. And you would be leveraging the time zones to get things done. And theoretically, this works really well. But in reality, what's happening is you have a communication breakdown. And the more people that are in that process, the greater the communication has to be, and the more varied the communication has to be. Now, I learned this when I was working for a company that was building a system, a massive system, for a company called Reed Elsevier. And Reed Elsevier is a learned journal publisher out of almost everywhere, but it's in Kidlington, England, and its main headquarters is in the Netherlands, in Amsterdam. But what was really happening was we were a small company and we had coders that were across the world working. And what we found is that the more time zones we had that were following, the more communications we had. Now, in theory, what would happen is you'd have a coder working for 8 hours on a piece of code, and then they would pass it off to the next one. And if you strategically place the 8 hours time zones in the right areas, you'd have coding happening on the same piece of software all 24 hours, and it would be good quality software. What we did not take into account is the massive amount of communications that was necessary. So for every 4 hours of code, we'd need almost 3 hours of documentation of that code. And if you know coders, they don't like to write documentation. They only like to write the code. So they would write for 8 hours and we'd send it along, and all of a sudden, the next people would get it, make some assumptions, and those assumptions would duplicate over and over again. When it got back to the same coder, the next day, they wouldn't recognize the code. So we had to implement a 3x communications, and it was very hard, and I actually had to fire some people to do it. But what we found is that if you increase the amount of communications, so not only text-based communications, can you send a video? Can you at least record something so they can see it? One of the powerful ways that we work, and because we have 23 people in 7 different time zones, is I'll record a video showing my screen and walking through what I'm asking them to do. Now with AI, you can actually have it duplicated as well and written. At that point, we didn't have that, but being able to actually see a video of exactly what they're doing, and you can point to things on the screen and they can see you and hear you, is a great advantage, especially if you've got language challenges. Invariably, some people are going to be working in a foreign language. So the more visual, the more auditory, the more levels of communications we can create. Even at some points, we would have to have stand-up meetings where I would have meetings where I'd get on video at 3 o'clock in the morning with Australia because that was important. Or I was in New York and I needed to talk to someone, so I woke up at 3:30 in the morning, New York time, to talk to the people in England as they got into work. So creating that ability to have that conversation, to escalate information, to not only do it the way you want to do it, but find out how the other person does. So if I've got a complex system that I'm trying to explain, I will talk it out, I will write it out, I will set up a video, I will send it to them, and then I'll call them to see if they have any questions. And we'll go over it on Zoom. And therefore, I make sure that's done. Is it substantially more work? Yes. But it is less work than having to try and explain it and then having to redo it. It's better and better for everyone if they feel like they understand what they're doing and they move forward more efficiently. Power of that is something that cannot be underestimated. We have to be able to deliver this information. We have to be able to get it done. So every 3 to 5 time zones that you're going to be using, in other words, as separated by, you need to increase your communications. It may not be good enough just to do a text or a quick email. You may need to do a video. You may need to do a conference call. And you absolutely need to set up systems by which you can deliver information efficiently. And that means you're all coding in the same way, or you're all labeling the systems the same way, or you're labeling the files the same way. You're using the same terminology for each one of the levels and areas and what you're doing to make sure that everyone is on the same page. The more you spend time doing that, the more you're forcing that, the more you're getting everyone on systems together, the better you're going to be. I can tell you one of the things that I've always considered insisting on, I haven't really done it yet, and some of my team would be very upset at me, is everyone being on an iPhone, so we all have the same text messaging system. Now, I know you're going to say that there's Slack and there's WhatsApp and things like that, but to have one native system that everyone is on and utilizing has been a huge benefit for us. In fact, I may insist that the people that are working directly with me actually have the same OS that I do. So the people who are working directly with me all are on Macs because I can trade information back and forth and we can share information much more efficiently. Now, yes, you can do that with PCs as well, but in many ways it doesn't quite work the same. The ecosystem is not the same. So forcing people into a structure, even if they don't like it, is going to be one of the major keys to making sure that you get all of your information. I first presented this at the International Project Management Convention, and I put up a quote, and I was like, well, you need to actually tell me where you got that quote. And I had to laugh at the person. I said, that's my quote. We developed the system in-house that I want to share because I love working with people with other countries. There is so much great talent out there. There's so many interested people, and they're so good at what they do. Why not leverage them? And therefore, we have to learn to think and act differently and make sure that what we say, the idioms we use, are very clear. And if they're not, to explain them. So we try and get on a call once a week and with people in countries that are actually opposite to me. When I'm asleep and they're awake, I used to try and get on a call once a month just to share what's going on, explain, and get them to understand how I think and how I talk, and understand how they think and how they talk. Brings the community together, but upping that communications makes all the difference in the world. What's your favorite way of communicating? And what have you found is the best way to communicate with your team? Leave in the comments below. Let's continue this conversation.
Thanks for tuning into today's episode on the Strategy Session, where we take your business from stuck to unstoppable. Here's another video I think you'd enjoy. If you found these insights valuable, remember to hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, and ring the bell for notifications on our latest videos. Remember, you're not just marketing, you're making history with Ventured Gain.